And we've been in constant contact. And they've been very thankful and appreciative of the help the federal government is providing. And I'm appreciative of all they're doing as well. And I've told them to contact me with anything else they need. We have made available an unprecedented number of assets to deal with this crisis. We're going to continue to do so until the job is done. But now I want to be clear about something. For the last few weeks, there's been a reckless, irresponsible, and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies that are disturbing people. It's undermining confidence in the incredible rescue and recovery work that has already been taken and will continue to be taken. And it's harmful to those who need help the most. There is simply no place for this to happen. Former President Trump has led the onslaught of lies. Assertions have been made that property is being confiscated. That's simply not true. They're saying people impacted by these storms will receive $750 in cash and no more. That's simply not true. They're saying the money is needed for this crisis is being diverted to migrants. What a ridiculous thing to say. It's not true. Now the claims are getting even more bizarre. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congresswoman of Georgia, is now saying the federal government is literally controlling the weather. We're controlling the weather. It's beyond ridiculous. It's got to stop. In moments like this, there are no red or blue states. There's one United States of America, where neighbors are helping neighbors. Volunteers and first responders are risking everything, including their own lives, to help their fellow Americans. State, local, and federal officials are standing side by side. Let me repeat, no one should make the American people question whether their governments will be making sure that this disaster, when it strikes, they'll be there. We will, all of us. I'm going to turn it over to Vice President Harris.
Dude, what an insane state of affairs, dude. This country, like, we are... How the f did we make it this far, brother? Actually, how the f did we make it this far? We got one of the two major parties, like, unironically bouldering towards some of the most insane things. It is actually insane. Things have gotten more insane than they... Things got significantly more insane in the last decade. I'm sorry. Straight up. Things were always pretty here. You got those videos of being like, oh, well, if I can't drunk drive, then, you know, this is a nanny state. This is communism or whatever. Sure. Guys like that have always existed. But you can't tell me that those in positions of power genuinely using the bully pulpit and the opportunity that they have to talk to millions of Americans. I've never seen it like this, man. I've never seen it like this. Holy. And it's not just Donald Trump. Before you say, oh, Donald Trump is he is a responsible party for this, for sure. He is absolutely responsible for a big chunk of this. But like the entire Republican Party is moving along with him.
Harris, if that's okay with all of you. Thank you. Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Liz, thank you for the work that you have been doing. As the president said, we've been working around the clock to prepare for Hurricane Milton and to ensure that people are safe, including ensuring federal, state, and local resources are being coordinated in a smart and efficient and effective way. We have also been in constant contact with the leaders in Florida to make sure that we are cutting any red tape that might get in the way of getting relief to folks, to make sure also that communities receive the resources and the support that they need as quickly as possible. Already, we have sent more than 1,000 federal personnel to be on the ground in Florida to assist with what needs to happen in the state to prepare for this hurricane, and we will continue to scale up those efforts. To the people of Florida, and in particular, the people of the Tampa region, we urge you to take this storm seriously. As has been said before, this is a storm that is expected to be of historic proportion. And many of you, I know, are tough, and you've ridden out these hurricanes before. This one's going to be different. And so we ask you that by every measure, understand it's going to be more dangerous, more. So please listen to your local officials. They know what they're talking about. They know what they're doing. And if you are told to evacuate, please evacuate immediately. Do not wait until it is too late. And in the hours and days ahead, President Biden and I and our administration will continue to do everything we can to protect the people who have been in the path of this storm. And once the storm has passed, we will be there to help folks recover and rebuild. as we continue to do for those communities in Florida, Georgia, North and South Carolina, and across the Southeast who have been devastated by Hurricane Helene. Finally, as the president mentioned, to any company that or individual that might use this crisis to exploit people who are desperate for help through illegal fraud or price gouging, whether it be at the gas pump, the airport, or the hotel counter, know that we are monitoring these behaviors and the situation on the ground very closely, and anyone taking advantage of consumers will be held accountable. The bottom line is this hurricane poses an extreme danger, and we urge everyone in Florida to take extreme caution. And we are with you, and we will get through this together.
What are you most worried about today and into tomorrow? And what messaging can we do to help people in the hours before it makes landfall?
Mr. President, the biggest concern is making sure people have gotten out of harm's way. Over the next 24 hours, we are going to see significant winds. We are going to see flooding from the rain. People need to be able to take this storm seriously. They need to move, if they still have time to move, out of harm's way. And we are prepared to support Florida with additional search and rescue assets to help save lives. That's our immediate concern, Mr. President, is saving lives over the next 24 hours.
Have you ever seen a storm like this one since you've been in charge?
I think this is going to be one of the biggest ones that we have seen after it makes landfall. I mean, we saw a lot of impact from Hurricane Ian, but this one is different. This one just looks different, and I think we're going to have a lot of impacts and people that are going to need our help, sir.
Well, thank you very much.
Administrator Chris,
Yes, ma'am.
are we concerned about any misinformation or disinformation regarding evacuations that we need to clear up at this point?
There's been a lot of misinformation out there, Madam Vice President, that's for sure. But I have not heard anything specific to the evacuations. I think that the local officials, the state officials have been very strong in getting that message out there and getting people to move out of harm's way. I was in Florida on Monday and met with the mayor of Tampa as well as the mayor of St. Pete, people evacuating. And so they are listening to their local officials, and that was encouraging.
That's great. Thank you.
The idea that sometimes it takes days for rivers to crest after a major storm like this. Are there any particular areas of concern that that are related to this type of flooding? And how long do you think the flooding conditions could last? In other words, I think people think once the winds are down and have gotten through that, okay, we're all set. But these rivers flooding are consequential, and it takes time, right?
It takes time. That pushes up every nook and cranny of Florida. So it goes up bays, goes up rivers, it fills in all these areas. And then you add that incredible amount of rainfall, and that rain can't drain because this has it blocked. So just really looking at some of the areas in Hillsborough River, Alafaya River, the Peace River, some of these type of traditional places that could flood, we really got to watch those areas and those communities. So it takes quite a while for that water to drain.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Ken, I have a question for you. You mentioned words matter, and
You said, did you see the American journalist Jeremy Lafredo was kidnapped in Israel? He's my best friend. I didn't know. Yeah, I did hear about this. Yes, I did. I'm going to get to this in a little bit.
I know there's a lot of media following this briefing. So we've gone from a Cat 5 to a Cat 4, and the language that a lot of folks have been using is downgrade. But it sounds like you're cautioning us that may communicate a sense that the danger is lessened when in fact it's not. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know a lot of folks are watching right now and would love to have your feedback on how we should be talking about this.
Yeah, we need everybody that communicates to the public to be on the same page with the words, because I've 30 years of doing this. I've seen this so many times. People will think, oh, it was a Cat 5, now it's a Cat 3. That's not a reason to relax. It's not weakened. That's not diminished. That means that we've expanded the wind field. The impacts don't change associated with that. And I've seen this in Hurricane Florence and other historic hurricanes. So we have to be mindful of the words that we use and focus on those impacts. Those impacts haven't changed no matter what the wind speed does over the next 24 hours.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
I want to get now to my colleague, Dana Bash. Dana, I understand that you got Vice President Harris on the phone. That's right, Brianna. Thank you so much. Vice President Harris, I believe that you are now on the telephone fresh off of that briefing that we all saw here on CNN. Thank you so much for being here. What is the most important thing that you learned that you want to amplify for Americans who are in the path of this dangerous storm right now?
The briefing was very helpful on a number of fronts, but most importantly in getting the word out to folks in Florida in particular to please heed the advice and direction of your local officials, because this storm is unlike anything we have seen before, and that's the point of emphasis. This is unlike anything we have seen before. We got a lot of tough, strong people in Florida who have been through a lot of hurricanes, tornadoes, but this is not like anything they've dealt with before. So if they have been told to evacuate, they must evacuate.
By the way, if you want to know what housing deregulation in an effort to build 3 million additional units look like, Florida is a perfect example of housing deregulation in order to build additional units is, just so you understand.
We expect that this is going to be, and I would emphasize that. I would also emphasize the information that we received, that even if the designation of the category shifts from a 5 to 4, that's not actually a downgrade in terms of the danger and the dangerous potential of it. And so let's not have people rely to their detriment on, oh, this sounds like it's going to be less serious than we thought. They made very clear Category 5, Category 4 are almost equivalent in terms of the danger and the damage that they will create. So I would urge people to really take that information away, as well as to know there are dedicated folks on the ground from FEMA, from federal, state, and local agencies that are there to help you in terms of advice now, to help you get out, and to help with recovery and rebuilding after this storm and this hurricane passes.
And Madam Vice President, I just want to follow up on the FEMA readiness part of this discussion. We heard the Administrator Deanne Criswell say earlier today that the agency is down to $11 billion in relief funding because it spent about $9 billion just over the last week. Are you confident FEMA has the resources to manage what we are, never mind what we're about to see in Florida, but of course, that's on top of Hurricane Helene 2 weeks ago?
FEMA absolutely has the resources that it needs now and to deal with this hurricane as it hits and the aftermath. And of course, we want Congress, when they come back, to do their job of making sure that they pass legislation to provide more aid, because, again, this is really historic in terms of what we've seen. And so we do need to buff up the aid and assistance that we give FEMA, understanding that this is unusual and may be, sadly, the new normal.
But you don't believe that, because Congress is not in Washington.
The same kick streamer you saw earlier is literally doing the viewer meme and holding to a tree right now in a flood of water. He's gonna, just so you understand, that dude is he is filming his own. That's why I haven't clicked on that link, okay? I don't know why people are like, oh, I can't wait to see this guy. The fact that Kick didn't ban him already, knowing full well that he's going to, is shocking to me. Truly a morbid state of affairs. He might not actually be in Tampa. He could be in another city experiencing heavy rainfall. I hope.
Right now, you don't believe that they need to come back earlier in order to give FEMA more resources?
FEMA has what they need right now.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about what both you and President Biden talked about in this briefing, and each of you has talked about many times over the past few days, which is this dangerous misinformation that is coming from a lot of corners, including your opponent in the race for the White House. Several local Republican leaders have been pleading with them to stop. Have you spoken to GOP officials in Florida to figure out how to help combat that right now as it's about to get a whole lot worse?
Well, I'll tell you, I have spoken with local officials who have been struck, for example, by Hurricane Helene, and they are doing an extraordinary job in trying to combat the misinformation. And I'm talking about sheriffs, I'm talking about mayors, I'm talking about local officials. I don't even know their party affiliation, by the way. but leaders on the ground who know that it is not in the best interest of the people living in those areas to not know their rights, not to know what they're entitled to, and to be afraid of seeking help. It is dangerous. It is unconscionable, frankly, that anyone who would consider themselves a leader would mislead desperate people to the point that those desperate people would not receive the aid to which they are entitled. And that's why I call it dangerous. And we all know it's dangerous. And the gamesmanship has to stop. At some point, the politics have to end, especially in a moment of crisis. And the crises that we've been seeing affect so many people. I've met people who have lost family members through Hurricane Helene. We know the desperation and the fear that the folks who are attempting to evacuate Florida are experiencing. The last thing that they deserve is to have a so-called leader make them more afraid than they already are.
We have been fact-checking. In fact, just before you came on, we did Keeler, along with Daniel Dale and Priscilla Alvarez are doing that, and we're continuing to do it. One of my sort of follow-up questions to that is about, we know what Republicans, many Republicans are saying that is just not true. One of the things that came out of
whatever the source, Dana, just so we're clear, it hurts the American people, and it's got to stop.
Madam Vice President, I also just want to ask a little bit more about the federal response. One of the Republican senators from North Carolina, Tom Tillis, who I should say is not critical of the federal response, he says he believes that President Biden should appoint an active duty commander to lead the federal response to these. Is that a good idea? Should he do that?
I mean, Dana, we're looking at we've already, as part of the briefing, heard just minutes ago that tornadoes have actually already hit the area. So now is not the time to necessarily think about restructuring as much as it is to get boots on the ground and the support directly that is needed as a matter of urgency. And certainly all good ideas are well.
Bro, my own fan base is so, like, as a 42-month subscriber, you should probably recognize that, like, as much as you're trying to make a joke, there are genuines who think that way, and that they will turn around and be like, see, Hassan's own community is saying this as well. And if you want to be that desperately mentioned in a clip comp from some white supremacist account that's going to be like, yo, Hassan's fans are riling up against him, go off, kings and queens. But, like, you've been in here for quite a while. You know how these psychos operate. You should know better, Anyway. I know it's a joke. Chatters, it's just a bad one. That's my point. There's one thing I've noticed with Kamala Harris's like rhetoric and her tone. I think Trump does a pretty good job of like invoking and emoting the anger that the crowd feels. And I think this is an opportunity for Kamala Harris to also literally just be like, what are these guys saying? Because when I hear, I don't know, some Republican governor being like, we need to restructure the entire command of this hurricane relief and recovery effort while the hurricane has already made landfall, like, you should just turn around and be like, well, that seems kind of silly, doesn't it? Like, even though she is cognizant of how utterly this proposal is, I wish she would also resemble, I wish you could also invoke the feelings that I have right now as an onlooker, as someone who's watching this. And I don't really care because, like, they are saying the right words here. They are doing the right things and saying the right things from a cold, calculated, sociopathic, electoralist analysis here. Having said that, it would be nice if they were just like, it would be nice if she was like, what are these people saying? 5 p.m. EST Milton update. Milton is Cat 3 with 120 mile per hour winds and a minimum pressure of 948 millibars. Here is the key message from the NHC. Many hazards ongoing in association with the hurricane currently, with life-threatening storm and surge and hurricane force winds expected on the West Florida Peninsula tonight. That's the latest update.
But right now, let's let FEMA, let's let the folks who are on the ground do the work they need to do right now in real time. That's about assisting with evacuations, getting correct information out, battling, sadly, the misinformation, and putting in place the resources that can hopefully mitigate against the predictable damage. Including, for example, we heard a very good briefing from the Commandant of the Coast Guard the work that needs to happen around being concerned about potential damage to the port in Tampa. That kind of work needs to happen urgently, and that's where my focus is.
Yeah, and the window for evacuation is definitely closing as we speak. Madam Vice President, before I let you go, I do have to ask you about another phone call that I believe you participated in earlier today with President Biden, and that is with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Did he talk at all about what his plans are to retaliate against Iran after its ballistic missile attack against Israel last week?
Well, I'll tell you, it was a classified call, and I don't have any announcements to make about what happened during that call, and I just can't get into private diplomatic conversations on this channel. But it was an important call.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on, spending a few moments with us. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Madam Vice President, I know that this country is currently being attacked by 10,000 bombs worth of hurricane power. But can I please get an opinion, maybe a breaking story from you about Israel also taking advantage of this chaotic media situation to nuke Iran? Can you please give me just a crumb? I need to know.
Just hours before
I need to know if we are nuking Tehran or not.
Many folks are still trying to flee this part of Florida. But talking to folks around Tampa Bay, we found some people are either unwilling to leave or they're unable.
Of local emergency.
Despite days of evacuation warnings from local officials,
Quickly secure your home or safely evacuate the area.
some in the Tampa-St. Petersburg area are refusing to heed the call. You're going to ride the storm out in this boat right here.
Yeah,
Why?
because I have nowhere else to go.
Joseph Malinowski has lived on this boat since March.
This is my home. This is
He's wrong, by the way. This is wrong. Everyone has somewhere to go. There are shelters. These people are just objectively wrong. He's out to sea now. Yeah. Not only do they have shelters, if you don't have a car, you can try to take advantage of the Uber structure that they set up. Not entirely certain how reliable that is. What if you can't afford to get to a shelter? Great question. That's why I just told you can take an Uber to a shelter for free. These are some of the many different ways in which, not only that, but emergency services have reached out to this man who is now becoming a viral sensation on TikTok numerous times. Shut the up. Stop making excuses for this. They literally were trying to forcibly remove him from the boat. Okay? Y'all are so in all of your forward levels of thinking, in all of this like empathetic mindset that you've demonstrated, that you've cultivated over the past couple of years, you've decided that sometimes people don't have the capacity to be just a crackhead on a boat. This man is a crackhead on a boat.
my everything. This is all I have right now.
He ignored calls to evacuate during Helene, anchoring in the same area.
And as long as my masts don't break or anything like that, we'll be all right. For the last one, Helena, I slept through the whole thing.
Helene made landfall roughly 200 miles to the north of Tampa. Milton, on the other hand, is expected to hit much closer, potentially bringing double the...
This was the outside water line, and it was about the same inside.
Deborah Davis also chose to ride out Helene at home.
Lower cabinets have been pulled, counters and sinks set aside.
The 65-year-old former teacher lives in a retirement community in St. Petersburg. Many of her and her neighbors' belongings were destroyed by 2 feet of floodwater here and are now piled outside the condo.
A lot of my neighbors were surrounded by their memories, and their memories are now sitting in that pile in the parking lot.
Davis says she's staying with friends nearby, unable to leave town after her car was totaled in the flood. Her friend Jerry told us he and his 2 cats are staying put in this complex.
I don't have anywhere to go, and I'm afraid to get stranded somewhere on the interstate. You run out of gas. What do you do?
Tampa's mayor says officials are going door to door citywide, offering transportation for those in need. Shelters have also opened up across the region.
So what is your message to people who decide to stay after all that you've said, all the warnings you've given?
If you're in a single-story home and a 12-foot wall of water comes, that is unsurvivable.
Dire words there from the mayor.
Joining us now is FEMA Administrator.
Like, guys, the American government is ass usually, but like this is one of the areas where, with the limited amount of appropriated funds that they have, they still try to make the most of it. And y'all are still like, no, there's this or that. Like, yes, there are always going to be some people who do not have the capacity to leave for one reason or another. But you must understand, there are also a ton of people. There are also a ton of people who are just crackheads. Okay.
Deanne, Chriswell, know all too well how busy you are right now and appreciate you taking the time to talk about us. Don't have to tell you about the potential magnitude of Milton. So what has FEMA done to be ready for it?
Good morning, Robin. I was just in Florida on Monday, and I had a chance to speak with Mayor Castor of Tampa, as well as Mayor Welch from St. Petersburg, to kind of hear where they were with the recovery from Helene, but what their concerns were going into Hurricane Milton. And so we are sending in additional resources to help supplement all of the stuff that Governor DeSantis has mobilized across the state. We have sent in additional search and rescue teams and assets to include airlift, high water vehicles. We're moving in commodities, food and water to be able to get into areas. We're bringing in power assessment teams so they can quickly help assess what areas and what critical infrastructure might need power restored fast. And then I've also put one of my National Incident Management Assistance teams right there in Tampa. So they are working side by side with the mayor's team so we can quickly mobilize these staged resources to help them with whatever their needs are right after the storm passes.
It is such a joint effort with so many folks. And how difficult, though, was it to plan for this storm coming on the heels of Helene just a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, I mean, having two massive storms like this back to back certainly is not something we wanted to happen, but we've done multiple storms before. We plan.
You're still pretending this hurricane is natural? Okay. Not to be that guy, but I know, like, okay, with the current state of affairs, I fear I am becoming one of those, like, no more jokes type leftists, okay? Because I can't tell if this is a person who has lost their dang minds, like the thousands of people that we've encountered online. Bait, look away. God damn. All right.
Plan for multiple scenarios like this. We have a layered approach to our staffing to make sure we can meet the needs of everybody that's still recovering from Hurricane Helene, but also make sure we have enough life-saving resources to support the state. And so we've been planning for this before it was even named as a storm and starting to move those people into the area as we anticipated what the potential could be.
Yeah, you don't get ready, you stay ready there at FEMA. We know that about you, Deanne. Now, but your own daily operations briefing points to severe staffing issues at FEMA. Is there more that you can do to assure the public that you are prepared for this storm and others?
Yeah, Robin, we have a layered approach to our staffing, and the numbers that we report in our daily operations briefing are just our management staff. So we also have additional staff that aren't every day, day to day doing specific work, and so we bring them in and we repurpose them to come in and support the response. But we also move people around from other open field offices to help support the immediate needs. But again, we're just one part of the team, Robin. We also bring in members from across the department through our surge capacity force. We also bring in the rest of the federal family to come in and support. We've done this before. We've done multiple events before. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but we've planned for this. We've done this, and we're going to make sure nobody has needs, and we're going to keep people there to support them.
That's very reassuring. And you see in our reporting that thankfully people are evacuating, but I grew up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and I know there are people who think they can ride out the storm at home. So what is your message to folks that are in the storm zone?
You know, this storm is going to be like nothing they have seen before. And while you can ride out a storm and hide from the wind, you need to move away from the water. The water is what people, and nobody has to from this storm. They just need to move out of the evacuation zone area into a place that it's going to be safe from the. I believe there's still time in some areas, but
the supercell that produced the largest tornado ever just a bit earlier is likely to produce a second one even stronger, making it the most powerful in Florida ever. Insane stuff happening right now. Yeah, there are massive tornadoes on top of everything else. Massive tornado on ground in Fort Pierce, Florida. There ain't no way these guys saw a tornado and was like, well, I guess I should drive towards it. That is actually insane.
Talk to me.
Please say a command after the beep. Available commands are calls, phone books, recent calls.
That's nuts, dude. Biden is on CNN live.
We've already approved emergency Florida. We have thousands of federal personnel on the ground. And we've staged and are ready to go. We have 20 million meals, 40 million liters of water. At my direction, the Secretary of Defense, Austin, has pre-positioned search and rescue teams, helicopters, and high water speed vehicles as close to the storm as possible, so they're ready to conduct life-saving missions. And the administrator of FEMA will be on site tonight in Florida, and the state's Emergency Operations Center. Both Administrator Criswell and I will be in constant contact with state and local officials in the hours ahead. Once the storm hits, we're going to work with state officials to clear debris, restore power, and do it as fast as possible. The Army Corps of Engineers will pump out water and decrease flooding. We've already directed the Department of Defense to be ready to provide active duty service members to support Florida after the storm, if Governor DeSantis requests the help, which I expect he might, just like we did in North Carolina. I have surged over 1,000 U.S. Coast Guard personnel to perform search and rescue missions and reopen the port of Tampa as soon as possible. Now, I want to reiterate a point.
Just got a shelter in place. No longer safe to be on the road alert. I'm in Sarasota, not in a mandatory evac zone, so staying home with my mom and dogs. I'm about half a block from the waterfront, but 20 feet above sea level, so should be safe from surge. Biggest concern is wind, but house is 2 stories and solid concrete block. If it gets bad, got everything set up in a big closet with no exterior walls to hunker down in. Be safe, Hasanabi head. Good luck.
Americans are putting their lives at stake and putting on the line to do the dangerous work that needs to be done now. And it's
Sarasota is directly in the center, chatter. What do you mean not in a mandatory zone? I'm sure he knows better than we do. I don't know why he would not be in a mandatory evac zone, but worst things worse, dude. You could be on a boat, you know? You're in Florida. I suspect you have a jet ski or a boat. Just hop on it, you know? Ride it out. Lieutenant Dan style.
true either. They're saying that money needed for these crises are being diverted to migrants. What the heck are they talking about? Stop it. It's outrageous. It's just not true. Now the claims are getting even more bizarre.
Yeah, it's just not true. It's going to Israel instead.
In Georgia. It's now saying the federal government is literally controlling the weather. We're controlling the weather. It's beyond ridiculous. It's got to stop. Let me close with this. As difficult as these days and weeks have been, we've seen incredible courage by so many of our fellow Americans. I want to thank all the first responders for running toward danger instead of away from it, for saving lives and making a difference. FEMA personnel risking their lives, climbing on hillsides to reach people cut off by Helena. Army National Guard flying through the gale wind force it's amazing what they're doing. Firefighters lifting collapsed wood and metal in an attempt to see if there are any survivors under the debris, risking their lives. Coast Guard teams rappelling from helicopters to rescue people and risking their own lives. And there are countless friends and neighbors who have sacrificed for the greater good. Volunteers leaving their own families behind to help search for someone else's family. Fellow Americans looking out for one another. That's America at its very best. That's who we are. So my final message tonight is to the people of Florida and all the impacted states. We've got your back. We've got your back. And Kamala and I will be there for as long as it takes to rescue, recover,
Is it true that
and
FEMA
rebuild.
funding is affected by Israel funding? No. FEMA does have a budget shortfall, which the federal government was aware of. They could have funded that, but overall, no. FEMA funds are done in Congress. There are different brackets for FEMA funding, relief being the one that we're talking about here. The relief funds outside of Donald Trump's administration when he was president have never been diverted into, at least under the Biden administration, towards like immigrant detention facilities. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has done that.
But I just find it, I know I've used the phrase more than I've used it ever in my whole career, un-American. It's un-American. It's not who the hell we are. What are they talking about?
Sir, have you considered calling him and asking him to stop doing that?
Come on.
Mr. President, does Governor DeSantis...
I was watching Disney adults streaming from the park until the minute it closed. It was dreary content, and yes, Disney made people today gates didn't close until 2 p.m. Disney made people work today.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And I think that's important.
Can you say that Florida has everything it needs for the storm? How was your call with Netanyahu today?
We didn't talk about the storm.
Thanks, everybody.
President Biden again urging Floridians in Milton's track to listen to local officials for safety instructions. What those local officials are trying to stress. We're going to go back to the impact.
Instead, in case you were wondering how Disney handles this, we get overtime, double time pay, even when sleeping. At the hotels we're working at, we're free stay, no driving in and out. We take care of stuck guests with pre-packed food and minimal restaurant service. Literally one of the safest places to be in Florida during a hurricane. Yeah, I have heard of this before. That Disney usually, I mean, the theme park closes for obvious reasons. It's going to